Today's episode of The Lucky Orange Show features a conversation with Roddy Smith. Roddy is the Director of Partnerships over at reviews.io, which is a great review management solution with some awesome UGC and video review features, and it's trusted by over 9,000 brands. In this conversation, Roddy shared some awesome tips and advice for anyone who's a current partner manager, but also anybody who's thinking about that as a role or a profession moving forward, as well as any brands who see this as a potential growth lever heading into 2025. More specifically, in our conversation, we talked about evaluating new potential partnership opportunities and what to look for in a partnership that says it might be ready for the next steps. We also talked about how partnership management as a profession has evolved in the past decade or so, why being easy to work with is always a winning strategy, and steps to building a partner program from zero. So if you're ready, let's go talk to Roddy. I think let's start, just for anybody who may not be totally familiar with you and your background and where you come from, could you introduce kind of what led you to this point and, why we're qualified to be talking about this?
Yeah, sounds good. I don't know if I'm qualified, but I'm going to talk about it. So
there we go.
My name is Roddy Smith. I am the Director of Partnerships over here at AppHub/reviews.io. AppHub is, we're about 200 people strong. We've got staff across the globe with 20 odd apps under our umbrella, but sort of flagship apps being reviews.io, influence.io, address validator, Boost, search and filter, viral sweep, rich returns, and a bunch more.
Yeah, nice. So, I think and you can take this kind of wherever we want to go, but I think the best place to start would be that you've been in e-commerce, adjacent to or directly in Shopify and these ecosystems for quite some time. And so I want to start by just saying, what has changed in recent years? What are you seeing? What are some trends that we're noticing? And, what are some significant shifts really that you've observed in this space?
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel like there have been a lot of shifts over the years. And just for context, I probably should have done this in my intro before. I've been in e-commerce for nearly a decade now, with the vast majority of that revolving around partnerships and sales.
Sure.
So I don't know if I'm any expert on this. I'm no historian, but I feel as though we've definitely seen a few shifts over time. I think the rise of omnichannel has been a pretty big one. I mean, merchants aren't relying on just their Shopify store anymore. They're expanding out to multiple channels across social, marketplaces, physical retail. We've seen Shopify has really been pushing on Shopify POS. We're seeing bigger and bigger labels and brands moving over and using POS across boatloads of locations. I was chatting with an agency just earlier this week who was rolling out POS for a merchant across 37 locations in Canada. So no small integration. And I think we saw omnichannel sort of contract a little bit, at least the brick and mortar angle through COVID and all of those weird times. But now that we're back out there and have been for a while now, really seeing that grow.
Yeah, omnichannel. And I had an opportunity to speak with Greg from Omnisend about the combination of email and SMS and the role that that's playing. That kind of feels like it's been a shift, and now it's almost table stakes to say you're not going to succeed in this hyper competitive space, no matter what you're selling. Excuse me. No matter what you're selling, you're not going to be able to compete if you're not hitting people in the right place at the right time, in the right channels, and email and SMS and all this stuff. And I imagine that's reflected in the partnerships that brands and apps must have to say, we know that we're only a part of the puzzle. How has that played out in your space as somebody from a partnership standpoint, to say, we recognize that the brands are operating in an increasingly omnichannel way?
Yeah, I think you touch on a good point. I'm a piece of the puzzle. I think one of the biggest mistakes that partnerships people make, I'm speaking mainly towards the agency angle here, but one of the mistakes that they make is thinking that your software is the most important thing to a brand. You are a piece of the puzzle. You are like a point in the journey, and you can't expect to take up boatloads of an agency's time, because time is money to an agency. That's non-billable hours that they're talking to you. So you need to make sure that that time counts. In terms of like how like tech partners like myself can integrate with that, you know, you got to make sure that your integrations are on point and you're staying up to date with things. You know, we're working on some stuff with like the Shop app and Shop Minis. I think you got to stay up to date with these things. Make sure that you tie in with Shopify POS. I think one of the nice things about Influence.io is we've got a really slick integration with Shopify POS. We've got a lot of like coffee shops and coffee roasters, and just a digital stamp card that works across your site, that works in the shop when getting a coffee, is a really effective way to, you know, drive loyalty to your customers. So I think staying on top of what Shopify is doing is going to be the best way, because the agencies are always going to be at the bleeding edge of what's possible with Shopify and pushing beyond that. And if you fall behind, then you're falling behind. You're going to get left behind.
Beyond having great direct contacts at Shopify, this question applies to really any of the major platforms. What is the best way to stay on point with what they're doing and what they're releasing? And maybe it matters less like release 32.1.b is this technical thing, but more so we think that they're trending towards embracing, you know, omnichannel more, or embracing POS more. Is there something that you tap into and fold yourself into to pay attention to say, this is where I think Shopify is going?
So I think the easiest one is listening to the investor calls. They're all publicly available. Having a listen to those when they come out every quarter, hearing how things are going. And then you'll hear Harley and Toby and others tease little bits about like what they're focusing on.
Right.
And they're usually pretty open about these things. And I think that applies to, you know, same with big commerce. Listen to their investor calls. It's the best way that you're going to get some insight into like what they're doing, what's next, because they want their investors to be excited about it. And if they're trying to get investors excited about it, then we who are riding on their coattails should also be looking at it.
Right. Yeah. No, we had some folks go to HubSpot's inbound this past, I guess it was last week. And one of the things they brought back was kind of a theme that they're noticing of HubSpot turning back towards their partner app ecosystem and embracing it and investing in it more. And I think that's one of those things that you just don't pick up on if you're not paying attention to the investor calls, going to the events sponsored by the platforms, going to the groups, whatever it is, and staying plugged in. And, you know, going back to the omni-channel part, I know that Scott Brinker, Martech, HubSpot sort of person, talks a lot about composability of apps. And I think that plays into the omni-channel thing. Composability meaning, how do you take parts of your tools and either embed them with other tools or make them work better with other tools? So not the entire thing, not an integration, just saying everything we have works with everything you have, but maybe just little parts of it to say, here's this feature we have that we know would benefit your audience. How can we make our tool more flexible, more composable? And that seems like that's a theme that we're noticing as we approach potential integrations, to say, we don't necessarily need Lucky Orange's heat maps and session recordings and surveys and chat and announcements and everything to be folded into what we do. But maybe there's one part that would be hyper useful. So kind of as a tangent that we're seeing that. I'm curious, this is a dangerous, slippery slope, but like, let's talk about AI. What are you seeing in the partner ecosystem in Shopify in general with AI? And if you hang up and end the podcast right here, I might understand. But what does it mean to you, and how is it showing up in your world?
Yeah, I mean, like, is it even a podcast being released like right now if you don't talk about AI?
Is it if it's not two dudes talking about AI, is it a podcast?
Exactly. Look, I think you can't ignore it. It's everywhere. It is pervasive, and the applications are massive. I'm seeing some of our agencies do some really cool stuff. Shout out to the guys over at Parkfield Commerce, Rich and Thor over there. They've built some really cool stuff using using AI and alt tags, and being able to like automatically fill those out, so you're not having to sit there for hours like typing out like product descriptions and things like that.
Nice.
Also, another shout out to the guys over at Gadget who, you know, allowed them to build that app very, very quickly. So I think there's some really cool stuff happening in that space. For me, some of the things that I'm interested in with AI is, leveraging it to build out like an LMS for our partners so they can get more up to speed on features and functionality. I think is a really interesting use case. I don't really like it for writing emails or any of that stuff because it's not like, for me, partnerships is personal. It's a personal relationship. So if I'm emailing somebody and I know that they're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, boo, that I'll call out that, you guys have a game coming up against this weekend against the Saints.
I don't know. I'm not a big
I
enough
don't know
fan to
either.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you're gonna call those things out and talk about them. And I think I don't think AI will ever be able to really replace true personalization. I feel like we could go off on a tangent on its own about personalization in e-commerce because I do think that there are elements where AI can really leverage what shoppers are doing on your site for in-session stuff. If they're clicking, it's showing more personalized recommendations. So if they're clicking into men's footwear, let's show them some socks. Let's show them some waterproof spray, shoe polish, whatever it is. That's like very basic personalization. But even taking it a step further, if they land on your site from an IP address in Toronto in January, you're probably not going to show them flip-flops and things like that, which you don't necessarily need AI for. But I think the level of personalization that we're seeing is just going further and further and further and further.
Yeah, it's definitely not. We're still early innings, and it's definitely not replacing the relationship. And I kind of want to double click on that a little bit to say that feels like that's what makes a great partner manager and partner. We'll say manager. There's obviously a variety of different roles that exist within this space. It's not usually somebody who is right out of college saying, okay, now you're our partner manager. It's usually somebody who understands the ecosystem, understands how these relationships work. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what it takes to start new partnerships and relationships. So in thinking about the space, you guys have, a dozen apps, but there are tens of thousands of apps or whatever the number is. And in Shopify, not even in platform agnostic apps. How do you even begin to say, when somebody asks if we want to partner with them, how do you evaluate it? And then on the flip side, how do you figure out if we want to go after a new partner, how do we evaluate and figure out, does this make sense for our ICP or whatever it is? What does this sort of in and out, inbox outbound sort of thing look like for you?
I think the biggest one for me, for any new partner who applies to our program, it all starts with a conversation. People do business with people. I've built a career on that, and I think it's very important that if you talk to the person, you gotta click a little bit, and then I think rolling into it, it's as you said, do our ICPs match? Do you work with the people that I want to bring onto our software? Are you already working with a competitor? Are you already best friends with one of the other reviews providers out there? And if you are, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not here to replace any of the other ones out there because they're good products too. I'm never going to speak ill of them. And I know lots of people who work over at those products. But I think there's something to be said for providing options. If you're, and again, looking at this from an agency angle, if you're an agency and you're talking to a merchant, you want to provide options and let the merchant choose which one's going to be the best fit. I think there are a few things that all agencies look for in a partnership. We actually did a hierarchy of needs assessment with a lot of our partners, and the top three answers were: does the product do what I need it to do? Does it work? Does it solve a problem? Second one, priority support. Are you going to be available to talk to me? I mean, looking over at my Slack on the other screen here, I've got I don't know, a couple hundred shared Slack channels with different agency partners. And as soon as I see one of those light up, I jump into it. And sometimes it's them, just saying hello. Sometimes if something's going wrong, then I can quickly pop our support team into it, escalate it to a dev, get them taken care of faster. Because if you can make the agency look good to the merchant, that goes a long way, because they know that the agency is the one who's got the connection to me and my team to get things sorted. And then the third one, these were all sort of in like varying orders, like 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3, 3, 1, whatever it was. But the third one was like co-marketing. Agencies always want to talk to me because I've got a boatload of merchants who are using our product. How can I get that agency in front of my user base? Can we do some co-marketing stuff? Can we do a better together story? Co-marketing events, whether larger scale or more intimate dinners, any of those. Like, let's see how we can pump the agency's tires to get out there. When it comes to a tech partnership, that's a very different story in terms of how you assess it, because then you're going to be looking at more at like TAM, SAM, SOM, and all that sort of stuff. Using a tool like Crossbeam or Reveal to see who your mutuals are. Sometimes I think tech partnerships, this is going to be a controversial statement, are easier than agency partners to get rolling, because if you have merchant A and I have merchant A and our stuff works together and it makes merchant A happier, that's like a very easy win, because the merchant isn't having to absorb a new cost or anything like that. So any tech partner programs out there who just heard me say it's easier, that's a very big grain of salt, because tech partnerships are not easy. It takes a while to get these things rolling. And I think that's the biggest thing with partnerships is it's a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Yeah. And we definitely have we have a full-time employee dedicated to partnerships, integrations, and it is a big deal for Lucky Orange from an acquisition standpoint, from a visibility standpoint, for us to maintain and build on those relationships. A lot of our new relationships do start in a spot that you mentioned, which is a co-marketing first thing. The challenge that we fall into there is the next steps past the co-marketing. So we're a small, scrappy team. We only have so many people to be able to build out the technical thing. So I think part of what you're saying as the quote unquote controversial part of this is like, maybe starting the conversation, maybe on paper, making it make sense is easy. The technical execution and fighting for the engineering time, support, ongoing maintenance may be the more difficult side. But can you tell me a little bit about maybe what you would do to take relationships from co-marketing and move them forward? Or is it as simple as like, you just got to carve out the time to build out the integration once you realize it would work?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think like if we're talking tech partnerships, as you said, getting the dev resources, putting together the story, scoping it all, making sure that like you do have that ICP overlap. And I think it's a bit of like it's like you need two to tango here.
Yeah.
So like a big part of what we look for in a tech integration is like, are they willing to go to bat for us and vice versa? And if you're both willing to go to bat for each other to work at it, then I think that's a pretty strong sign. And you start out with like the sort of the baby step of a case study, some sort of co-marketing engagement, and then from there you start looking at like the account mapping, start looking at like, okay, where's the overlap, give me 3 accounts that you're jazzed about on our side and vice versa, and then start small. I think too often with all partnerships, it's like, give me everything is never going to work. You need to take like the baby steps here before you can properly start running. And again, these things take time. So you got to sort of slow roll it a little bit. And while you're doing those things, start looking at ways that you can promote the other partner to your user base. Are you getting them into your customer newsletter? Do you have like an in-app messaging? Do you have a way to identify those if the other people are using that integration through your success team to flag it and implement it? And then that allows you to start spinning up more co-marketing stuff. And it just sort of the snowball starts rolling and gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you cruise along.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like using the co-marketing phase of your relationship to evaluate whether or not they will go to bat for you, because it does take time and it does take resources, and we're all busy. We all are stretched thin, whatever. But like to execute really well on a webinar or an ebook or whatever, that is saying, yeah, we're here, we're ready to do this. And to distill that down even further, it goes back to what you said originally, which is like you just have to be, you have to find that chemistry. You have to find, hey, we're easy to work with and we can back up. Like you're asking us to be an expert about conversion optimization or about whatever, omnichannel, whatever it is. We can deliver a message that makes sense to your audience in this ebook, or we can show up to this webinar and crush it. And obviously the handoff then from the marketing, from the whatever team is executing on that to the engineering then is the next step. But at least at that point, you can say, yeah, they're showing up, they're easy to work with. And as like a brand, literally in my title, brand and content, I also don't want to move past this without saying like there are true benefits of the co-marketing of the brand,
Absolutely.
even if you don't get to the phase of a full-on integration. Like we're still talking about visibility. We're still talking about getting in front of an audience, even if they still have to wholly use your tools separately from these other tools that you're playing with and not integrated with. Like I think that it can't go completely missed in this conversation to say like, yeah, but there's also this brand thing. And
Yeah.
we can go down the rabbit hole, like what is brand, but there's still benefit there. And I imagine that is part of what gets pitched in these conversations too, is like, hey, our list size is 150K people. Like when you get involved in this, you're going to be getting visibility there. I don't know if there's anything else to add there about brand, but
Well, like, look, I'm definitely no branding expert. So I mean, I get the awareness. I get like, getting out there and showing your name. But I think part of what we're talking about here and what we're dancing around a little bit is the internal alignment to partnerships. If you don't have internal buy-in from your teams, it's not going to go anywhere. And I'm talking like, equipping sales to talk about your integrations, equipping sales to ask like, how did you hear about us? And that's it. You start uncovering some gems in there from agencies who might be your champions, who are recommending you, but aren't officially part of your partner program. Then moving on to like the success side of things is your success team are the ones who are talking to your highest value merchants more than anybody else within the business. So making sure that your success team is like connecting the dots in terms of your integrations is also, I call it like listening for cries of help. So if they talk about, my SEO just isn't performing. I can't figure out this like, black box of SEO and I don't know what's going on here. That's like to your success manager, that should be a light bulb moment. Be like, well, do you want to chat with like one of our partner managers who works with some really great SEO agencies? We've actually got blah, 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 who's in the same city as you. I don't expect the success manager to maybe know that level of detail,
sure.
but to just listen for that cry for help. And then like, one of the first things I did when I started up at App Hub here is I created like sales and partnerships, success and partnerships, support and partnerships, product and partnerships, Slack channels for us to all have a place to like get together and talk about these things. And then step 2 of it was to like try to automate that process. So for the support team, if we have an agency pop into the chat, generally I want our agencies to talk to like the partnerships team, my enablement managers, and get them out of chat, because support talks to merchants, partnerships talks to the agencies. And so all they have to do is they can tag partnerships, and that creates, we zap it over to Slack, and it creates a little message in there, and then any one of us can see it and be like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah agency. Out of the UK, let's loop in our UK partner enablement manager to like jump in and help sort things out, because then the enablement manager can escalate that a little bit more quickly. Same with like on the success side, creating automation. So if like they hear that cry for help, they have an easy way to tag it, zap it into the channel, then the appropriate person can take it and run with it. And I think that kind of internal alignment across all GTM departments is crucial to ensuring that your partner program actually works.
Yeah, I love a good zap.
Me too. I nerd out on them.
What's interesting about that too is that flash back 10 years, and this isn't really as much of a thing. I mean, the Crossbeams of the world running their conferences and talking about ecosystem-led growth and the differentiation benefits of your ecosystem being unique to your company and all this stuff, everybody on LinkedIn talking about partnerships. And it is it's not necessarily a much easier conversation, but I think that leaders looking at the organization and growth levers are much more likely to stumble upon the idea of, oh, we should probably have a partnerships team or a partnerships person, or within an existing department, this is kind of already happening in the shadows, like let's bring it forward. It feels
Yeah.
like that conversation now is much more obvious than 10 years ago. And tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it is kind of everywhere. And maybe it's just around me because I work with our partnerships director every single day.
Yeah.
But like it feels like the landscape is there, and there's a lot more frameworks and best practices and things that you can tap into to make this successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I started like dipping my toe into partnerships, it was as an AE, and it was after like going to some events like the early days Shopify Unite, Magento Imagine back in the day,
Yeah.
and like hanging out with these agencies who would like recommend our software, and then like as an AE I was like, these close way quicker and are easier to close because the agency knows us, likes us, knows the product, knows what goes into implementation. So they've already been like pre-sold a little bit.
It's magic.
And that sort of started the ball rolling for me. I was like, this is way more fun than sales. And I like working with a smaller group of people that do more together. But the line I often use around partnerships and is like partnerships is like an enterprise deal that just never closes. You're always looking how you got to keep moving it forwards, keep doing more, looking for ways to. I do hate this line, add value to the agency, because I feel like it's overused in the partnerships world. But it is true. You got to be looking for like how can you help the agency to make them look good to the merchant, because this is again a controversial statement. I'm stealing this one from Blair Beckwith, who's over at Mantle. I saw him last week, and he said he had like an epiphany that he doesn't care about merchants because he likes working with like the apps and the devs in the space. And I feel like that to a certain extent, but knowing that the merchant is like the end product for me. So maybe not quite as extreme at that. Whereas I care about our tech partners and our agencies. If I can make them look good by making their merchant happy, then at the end of the day, that's what I'm here for.
For those teams and people that are getting tagged to build a partnerships program, maybe in whatever size business works best for telling this, what would be some advice you would give for people? What are some things that trip people up when they're building out the partnerships program? You mentioned creating Slack channels, creating internal alignment and communications with sales, and making sure that there's enablement going on there. What else would you say to somebody that says, my C-level whatever just said, you're the partnerships person, we know you're in sales, we know you're in marketing, whatever it is, this is your thing now, go. How do you help them?
From an internal side, I'd make sure that you had very clear like OKRs or KPIs and know what the C-level is expecting. Because if the C-level is like, very true. If the C-level is only expecting like closed won deals MRR, like out the gate, then you need to temper those expectations and make sure that you have alignment in terms of like what you're working on. I think step 2 would then be to look for the people who are already using your software. Look for those champions that you already have. Talk to your support team and be like, hey, do you run into agencies? Who have you run into the most? Who do you see in the chat the most? That there's other ways that you can pull this data from Shopify in terms of like collaborator accounts, using like online access tokens to get like if you see the collaborators logging into your product and you're pulling them into your CRM or wherever, identifying those, and you're like, hey, I can see agency X is attached to this account, this account, this account, this account, this account. Great, there's your first partner. Go to them, talk to them. What do you like about us? And do like user research type interviews with them. Dig into why they like you, how they use you, how they recommend you, and start to build out that playbook that agency has already done. Because chances are, if you're an app that has, I don't know, thousands of users, there's going to be champions in there already. And then leverage that to then rinse and repeat. And so if you find digging through those contacts again, you find, okay, this one's attached to 2. Take the playbook that you had from the one that was attached by 4, and then go into that conversation. How do you incrementally increase that? And I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of partnership people get from the start is like just the buckshot approach of throwing as much at the wall to see what sticks isn't going to work, because you're just wasting your time on ones that aren't going to work when you need to do a better job of finding what sticks.
Yeah.
And if you go out to everybody, you're not going to be able to help the ones that you actually can.
Especially if you're the person, the partnerships person, the team of one, that you need to be really, really strategic. And I love the idea of looking inward and saying, what's kind of already a partnership that's not really a partnership? What's happening? What would our market, what would our users say? Oh yeah, that's obvious. You guys are partners now. Once you become partners, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are those things that are kind of, to use another corporate term, like low hanging fruit, right? Like,
Totally.
What's the stuff? What are people talking about? When sales and, as a product led growth company, we don't have sales, we have a support team, but what is the support team hearing about? Are they saying, oh yeah, people are saying they're also using this email tool. They want to know how to monitor, performance of traffic from their emails and their website using Lucky Orange. Okay, great. Like, let's tap into that. And starting there before you go out and say, of the 100,000 apps, who could we partner with? Well, let's email all of them. I think that's the focused approach seems to be a lot smarter.
Yeah, and like if you start with like 3 partners.
Yeah.
Then 6, then 12, then get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed here. I need partner enablement or another partner manager, or start to grow it out a bit more organically. You can't really, like, partnerships are hard to scale because relationships are hard to scale. And if you don't have any of the processes in place, then you're just not going to be able to scale them. So a big thing for me is like find like your beta process and get it firing-ish, and then work on it, improve it, and then you can move it on to the next batch.
What other elements do you think fall into that, the process and the initial thing? Is because there's a few assets and things that we have created to better service. So like a menu of just things that we can partner with you on, like co-marketing things, but also in-app features or newsletter or whatever. Are there any other sort of assets or channels or meetings or anything like that you think people need to build out to support that growing of a partnerships program?
Yeah, like I will always go back and say that like partnerships is as much internal as external. So you need to make sure that you are aligned with people on your success team, support team, sales, marketing, and have clear understanding, similar to what you would have done with C-suite, where your expectations are set. So you go to marketing and be like, okay, what can I get from you? I always say, I can't do this on my own.
Yeah.
I'm not a marketer. I'm not in support. I'm not in success. I need your help. And making sure that you have alignment and commitment from your internal team, saying like, marketing says, okay, I can commit to 1 blog swap a month and a webinar a quarter. Cool. We've agreed to that. Go execute on those things. Fill the seats, fill the blog, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You go talk to product and say, like, what can you commit to from like an integration perspective? But then some of the lower lift ones, like, what can you commit to in terms of like, getting in-app messaging in place for that webinar that you've got agreed from marketing? So like, I've seen lots of partnerships people talk about how like partnerships is you're like a mini COO running your own little like GTM process where we're one of the few departments that like touch all the other departments and connect into them. And so you need to make sure that you play the politics game properly. People want to help you. Make sure that like if you can get approval from leadership that like, hey, can we slot an OKR or a KPI into success to align with what I'm trying to do, then you're properly getting alignment where they're like, okay, I'm targeted on this. I got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds super easy.
Yeah.
What's in that, that points to a successful partnership program kind of requires an organization that has its shit together. Like, tactics have to be subordinate to strategy, which has to be subordinate to like a business direction and all this. So for it to work flawlessly, which may be over romanticized, you kind of have to have a system in place that says, oh yeah, we do KPIs and OKRs. We have these strategy planning sessions. We have these whatever. Maybe as the partner person, if you look around and you say, man, we don't have that, like maybe that's where you have to start, is to say, okay, well, what are we trying to, and part of your initial thing was like, if the C level person is coming to you saying, hey, your partnerships, it's like, all right, well, what are we trying to achieve? What are your expectations are? What are your KPIs and OKRs that would flow to this person? Maybe that takes longer than you want it to because the organization might be a little bit chaotic. You say, okay, well, this might actually be beneficial for beyond the partner person. Let's talk to the marketing team, the sales team, or whatever, and say, you're being measured by this. Let's shape that into OKRs, because I know that for me to do my best in the partnerships front, I need to chase something specific. Because I think it's easy in these settings, in these conversations, to kind of talk about the world of best practices and think that everybody has systems in place to support,
Totally.
to support OKRs and KPIs in a way that actually works. But that might be the first, I don't know, few months or something of the partnerships program is like, yeah, okay, what can we offer people? Who should we go after? But also, what are we measuring it on? And how does that stitch to the rest of the business?
Yeah, I think like when talking to the CEO or your C-level, whoever it is, I think one of the important things to emphasize is like I guarantee vast majority of CEOs are going to be like net new revenue is like what they want you to target you on. But there's so many other areas that partnerships impact. So if you're working with a marketer and you can, multiply your audience by working with another partner and all of their user base, that's brand awareness. That's getting you out there. Talking with support. If you can get partners out of support who maybe have they know exactly what they want, let's cut down on that response time and like some of the metrics that support is maybe measured on by getting them out of there. From a success point of view, churn. Agencies can help with churn. If somebody new comes into the brand and they're like, what is this on my bill? And then they're, talk to their agency about it. The agency can give you a heads up and be like, hey, you should reach out to brand blah, blah, blah. Because you can help reduce churn. They can also help you with upgrades. And from the sales side, obviously, they can help you close deals. They can give you information. I've seen time and time again where a deal has gone stale on the sales side of things, and our sales team pings the partner manager reaches out to the agency, and they're like, oh yeah, Bob, their CFO, is in Cabo this week, so you're not going to get any answers. Hit him up next week. Cool. We know what next steps are because Bob's in Cabo. So then you follow up next week, and then lo and behold, things get signed off, approved, blah, 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 on you go. It's ensuring that your AE isn't then peppering the person over on the brand side, like an email every other day, got any thoughts. It's, you're getting clear, streamlined communication. And so that's where partnerships can help all of these other teams. And I think that's often a very overlooked area of partnerships. And I think it's a disservice to the partner manager to only target them on net new revenue because that's what the CEO wants, when there's all these other ancillary things that all lead to success.
Yeah, no, and that totally plays into talking about saying the partner manager is a COO within their space. They're responsible for a whole heck of a lot of stuff. What has you, as you look towards, and we're rounding out 2024 here, as you look maybe towards next year or the end of this year, aside from a bunch of AI bots, what has you most excited?
Honestly, the internal alignment stuff, I really nerd out on. I really, really enjoy getting everybody rowing together. Getting success, working really well with partnerships. I just really enjoy it. And I think it just creates a better together story internally, where if I can make success or sales or support or whoever look really good, then that's what it's all about. I think partnerships, you got to be able, I feel like people who do well in partnerships are not selfless, but they're very empathetic. You want to help people. And I think whether that's internally with your own teams or externally with your partners. So I think that's what I'm excited about, and just sort of like continuing to sort of build more and more in the US space. And, speaking about like reviews.io mainly, like UK founded company, has a really good footprint in the UK as well as in, Europe, but not as much in the US. So I'm really enjoying building out our presence in North America. I think that's what gets me excited.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, there's definitely a lot to be spoken about and optimized from an internal alignment standpoint. And, maybe we can run this back and just go even deeper on that topic specifically. But where can people find you online, follow along with you, also discover reviews.io if they're looking for a review solution? And if you want to pitch anything about reviews.io as well as we kind of wrap up here.
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place. I'm not the best at posting on LinkedIn and like sharing on it, but if you message me, I generally respond unless it's a bad sales email. Even then, quite often actually, I will respond because I've been in their shoes. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. As for like App Hub products or like reviews.io being the website is probably the easiest way. You can also generally find myself or my team at all the sort of events throughout the US, whether we're talking NRF, Shop Talk. I will be at Shop Talk Fall, heading out to Minneapolis to see Irish Titans Ecom Forum, which I'm excited about, early October. Otherwise, I'm sitting in this chair all the time. So please come talk to me.
Very cool. Well, Roddy, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning and sharing your wisdom with the Lucky Orange audience. I really appreciate it. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that are in an increasing number of people that are getting in the shoes of partner management. Shopify is not slowing down. Shopify is not going anywhere. E-commerce isn't going anywhere. It's all evolving quickly. And it feels like it is leaning more and more heavily on partnerships and the kind of interconnected web that is the ecosystem. So I really appreciate you spending time with me today.
Oh, no way. Thank you for having me on today. I've really enjoyed this. I can wax lyrical about partnerships all day long because I truly enjoy it. I think it's a fun space to be in. You get to work more closely with smaller groups of people, and I just think it's fun. And then I also get to chat to cool tech partners like Lucky Orange. So thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, Roddy.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Lucky Orange Show. Before we go, if you haven't tried Lucky Orange yet, head over to www.luckyorange.com for a free 7-day trial of our leading conversion rate optimization toolkit. What's in that toolkit? Well, let's start with session recordings and heat maps. With session recordings, you can watch a full playback of an entire visitor journey on your website. Everywhere they click, scroll, move, everything they do in your site, a full playback. So you can see what's getting in the way of conversions and what is getting people over that finish line to convert. With dynamic heat maps, you can see the average visitor behavior on a page. So you can see clicks, moves, and scrolls. You can see how far down the page the average visitor is scrolling. And if something is below that line, that means that more than 50% of visitors are not seeing that. Lucky Orange also offers tools like live chat, announcements, and surveys so that you can communicate with your website visitors in real time. So again, if you have not tried Lucky Orange, or if you're not a user yet, head over to luckyorange.com. Check it out, 7-day free trial with no credit card required. If you're a Shopify store owner, head over to the Shopify App Store to download the Lucky Orange app to your store today, as well as BigCommerce, HubSpot, Square, and many more. Check us out, and happy optimizing.